Before that, anyways, my favorite game to talk about, Concord 2. Concord 3 will be coming out, actually, I think by the time this video is uploaded, it's already came out or so, but Concord 2, I want to see how Concord 2 is doing right now. Let me see real quick. Let's take a look at it, shall we? Good old Highguard. Oof. Oof. Yikes, dude. That is wild to see that. Oh, Jesus Christ, man. That is that's pretty fucking bad, I'm not gonna lie. Anyways, apparently Highguard devs expose baffling decisions and hubris that killed the game. So apparently Highguard devs speak out and exposes the truth behind the failure. This is what I was waiting for. I'm curious to see what happened behind the scenes of Highguard. This is the type of thing that I'm super interested in when it comes to game development in general, because I know for a fact there's some shit that happens behind the scenes that I personally know some of them, right? Because I did see. Did you hear that Highguard was meant to be a survivor game? Well, I'd be curious to see if this is where they're going to talk about it, actually, to be honest. Like I said, I have some friends who are developers, right? I haven't talked to them in a while because they've been busy or so, working on their games and everything. But they have told me what happens behind the scenes when it comes to making video games. Some of them do want to say shit of how shitty some developers are working with. There's some actual straight up chat. There's actually some people working, when you work with these people to make a game and everything, it is the most, apparently it's one of the most irritating things to deal with, which is kind of the craziest thing about it. So, because I had a friend or so that was telling me their experience specifically, and you want to know something? Some of them actually do talk about politics behind the scenes or so, and a bunch of other shit. So if you say one thing out of line or so, you're gonna get you're gonna get your ass chewed, apparently. Allegedly, right? These are all allegedly, okay? That's all I gotta say is these are all allegedly, but I'm not saying anything or implying anything. Wink wink, nudge nudge, okay? So I'm just saying allegedly, okay? I think it's pretty much confirmed that Tencent backed the game, but not sure though. That's what I'm hearing too as well. But we're gonna be, that's what I heard too.
So we finally know exactly what went wrong with Highguard, thanks to a report from investigative journalist Jason Schreier. Now, for those wondering about the current state of Highguard, it's looking incredibly bleak, with the game's all-time peak being at almost 100,000 players.
It's a lot less right now.
But since launch, we're seeing only triple digits, with the 24-hour peak as of the recording of this video sitting at a mere 551 players. Nowhere near enough to run a live service, and much less to financially make.
This game is gonna die. At least it lasted longer than Concord. That's what I could say about that. At least it did last longer than Concord.
Maintain it, as this is a free-to-play live service that requires recurrent monetization to support it. With Highguard, we're seeing nowhere near sufficient numbers. The reviews are still mixed even after all this time, sitting at a 46% on Steam. Even critic reviews are sitting at a mixed score of 60.
Oof. Even critic scores? Oof. Yikes.
3%. So it's not just about some hate train, right? There are just things that are genuinely off about Highguard, despite its valiant attempt. As I've said before, it's nowhere near as bad as the internet initially made it out to be, but it's also nowhere near as good as the people overinflating it made it out to be either. And despite the release of a 5v5 mode, that wasn't enough to revive the game. And the fact that most of Wildlight was laid off almost 2 weeks after launch is not a good indication of a thriving live service. Like, this live service is dead. Its fate is sealed as far as I'm concerned. I don't really see it making a comeback. With that said, let's check out this article from news outlet Bloomberg from none other than Jason Schreier, titled "The Story Behind the Failure of Highguard." And there's nothing here that's terribly shocking, if you ask me, but it's still good to know exactly what went on behind the scenes so that we can have like a cautionary tale for future developers. This is information that comes from 10 former Wildlight employees who decided to share what their experience was like developing this game. It all started in 2021 when developers from Respawn decided that they wanted to quit the typical AAA publisher structure under EA's purview and essentially find the freedom of the pre-EA days. So they formed Wildlight. And also, they were kind of mad that when Apex Legends launched, despite how much money that game made, the creatives who worked on the title, they just felt that they weren't, quote, benefiting enough from the resulting windfall. And so the whole point of Wildlight was to try to replicate that success with all of the developers' experience and have a profit-sharing program where if they shipped another massive success, everyone would benefit. And that actually ended up attracting a lot of talent from Respawn. And then along the way, they managed to secure some funding from Tencent, and that's when they finally started to develop this new game that initially was inspired by survival titles like Rust, where you could like invade enemy bases and whatnot. And so they initially wanted to make a survival-focused shooter, but because of the open world, like mass freedom nature of survival games, it just didn't align with the competitive play that they were also aiming for. 2 years into development,
they wanted to make an open world survival game, but at the same time, they wanted the competitiveness. So you're telling me you had two clashing ideas coming together, clashing each other, and there wasn't really a set vision for this game? Because you had people who were like clashing, butting heads with each other with ideas and everything. This is like literally one of the reasons why what Dubstep said specifically, right? When you make your own game studio, don't make the game that you want to make. So there is no PvE in this game. There's like 0 PvE in Highguard. So this is one of the reasons why there was no set vision. The crazy thing is that they tested a 5v5, but the choice was 3v3. This is why you have a beta. That's what I'm saying. You have betas for this game so they can give you feedback on what they can improve on before you even launch the goddamn game. You can't just shadow drop this game like it was in the early days.
Realized this concept just wasn't working, but they did salvage aspects of it, like the base rating component that the final game features. It wasn't until January 2024 that development shifted towards the Highguard that we know today, where they finally locked in on exactly what kind of game they wanted to make. That's when they came up with this raid shooter concept that had aspects of survival games and base rating and whatnot in an environment that could pave the road to a faster, more competitive gameplay style. They also played around with multiple types of team compositions. They apparently experimented with 4 teams of 3 players each. I even heard they previously had experimented with like 5v5 and whatnot.
Wait, go back? What?
They also played around with multiple types of team compositions. They apparently experimented with 4 teams of 3 players each. I even heard they
4 teams of 3 players each. So they actually did that concept, basically. It's like Bed Wars. Like Minecraft Bed Wars. But instead of it like being like multiple first one team only, it's 4 teams of 3.
obviously had experimented with like 5v5 and whatnot, but they eventually landed on 3v3 matches as the foundation of the game. And that right there would be one of their biggest mistakes. It would be one of the most criticized aspects of the game, so much so that they had to rush out a 5v5 mode to try to salvage a player base that was very quickly diminishing shortly after the game's launch. 3v3 felt very focused, but it just didn't feel very fun because the maps were too big for a 3v3 mode, where it felt like, especially during the looting phase before raiding bases, you just really hardly ever encountered other players. So that half of the game during a match just...
No, this is... Tencent had no hands in this. The developers had freedom, liberty. Tencent just, all they did was just gave them money. They did whatever the fuck they wanted to do, and this is what they created. Wildlight Studios created this game. Nobody put their hands in it to give them a direction where they need to go. They probably should have, to be honest, but you know,
felt really boring. But the developers felt very confident because internal tests all showed very positive results. But what a lot of former developers highlight is that these internal tests had blind spots. And that's something that I speculated when that one developer who blamed gamers and creators spoke out and talked about how, you know, the game we're making, you know, we did internal tests and the feedback seemed really positive. I talked about how...
yeah, but that's internal tests. That's not really the normal average gamer. If you had normal average gamers testing the game itself, they probably would give you the feedback that it's not that good.
Reliable internal tests can be, because the conditions of that are not really the same as when you finally launch a game to the masses. I've seen multiple occasions of internal tests not matching up with a final result, and so I've always said, do not fully rely on that, especially if you're shipping a brand new IP as a live service in this oversaturated market. Bloomberg's article highlights right here how, based on what their sources said, there were blind spots in the process of internal play testing. The game was complicated to learn. It was more fun when using voice chat, but as soon as you turn off the microphones, it made for a much worse experience.
Wow, shocker.
And not to mention that during internal tests and events, having developers on hand to answer questions and explain mechanics also led to different conditions than players would ultimately face when the game was released to the wild. And apparently when developers brought up to leadership that maybe they should do like a play test, like a beta or something, and get player feedback before fully releasing the game, those proposals were always turned down by leadership, which is just baffling.
See? You see the problem? You see the problem there? It's always the higher ups. Every single time the developers themselves said, like, at least the lower devs asked them, it'd be like, hey, we should probably get a beta test for this game, because I know for a fact that this is not going to end very well. So, but the higher ups said no. They literally said, no, we're not doing that. So I think it's the stubbornness of the higher ups that completely killed this game.
To me, it takes a very high level of confidence to operate in that way, but if the end results don't match the confidence, what you ultimately get is hubris, and that's a word that was mentioned by developers. I'll get to that in a bit. The leadership at Wildlight believed that because they worked at Respawn and had shipped massively successful titles, that they could kind of try to replicate what they did with Apex Legends, and that was very much the intent. Sources report in this article that they basically tried to repeat what they did with Titanfall as well as with Apex Legends.
You can't do that, not in this today's market. You could do that back then, because there wasn't really many of that specific genre. But you can't do that right now. Some of these higher-ups got that fake ego and pride. It ain't no fake ego, that's all I gotta say. They got too much ego and pride just because they came from fucking Apex Legends. They're like, oh, we're the developers from Apex Legends and fucking Titanfall, you know? We know how to make actual good games or so. And I'm like, okay, well, get back in line then. Doesn't really fucking matter because you're starting at square one.
With Titanfall, they shipped a multiplayer-only game, and then with Titanfall 2, they shipped a single-player campaign alongside multiplayer, and so the goal was to eventually develop a single-player campaign for Highguard, and then beyond...
What did I say? What did I say initially about that game itself? Especially these kinds of games in general? If you wanted to make a single-player story game, Just make a single player story game. Just do it. Just fucking do it. I'm so tired of these developers trying to make like super heavy story. Like they're trying to like do this super heavy lore, super heavy story, trying to tell you a story about the world, the characters, this and that, and all this other shit in general. And it's just kind of like, then just make a single player game. Worry about the multiplayer aspect later. Just do a single player game.
Beyond that, with the Apex Legends side of things, that game was one that was shadow dropped and still achieved massive success due to the element of surprise, and that's what developers were hoping for with Highguard. But then that plan was ruined when they decided to showcase it at the Game Awards.
It's too the market is way too saturated now for you to do a shadow drop. And then also on top of that, it did not help out that it was the final announcement too.
As the big finale, and so the shadow drop element went out the window. And also, like, Apex Legends has the backing of the fact that it was developed by Respawn, whereas Wildlight is still a brand new studio making a brand new IP, both of which are completely unproven. And to try to pursue the Apex route, I think was just a huge mistake and something that came from a place of like high self-importance. One that gave them a lot of misplaced confidence, and all of the internal playtests seemed really positive. So they were like ready to announce this thing and to show it to the world. But then, you know, the Game Awards thing happened. The feedback was overwhelmingly negative. And so they had to go quiet and incognito in the hopes that when the game launches, it would speak for itself. And the thing is, the game did speak for itself, because while the game launched to almost 100,000 concurrent players on Steam, and Bloomberg reports that there were similar numbers across PlayStation and Xbox, so a pretty big launch, a lot of players just didn't stay due to the flawed execution of this ambitious concept. Bloomberg highlights how reviewers criticized a number of elements, the fact that 3v3 wasn't big enough for how large the maps were, tedious mechanics such as mining, which are remnants of earlier versions of Highguard that focused more on survival, combined with complicated aspects that made it less fun to play if you're playing with strangers and microphones weren't on. And as
all I gotta say is, I'ma call out a certain YouTuber who was defending this game, Aztec Cross, okay? All right? I gotta call him out specifically, saying that I would assume he did enjoy this game, but I'm just kind of like, come on, man. Stop lying to yourself. Stop it. I get it. You're a ball and gun gamer. I get it. I understand. I was also a ball and gun gamer. Well, I was mostly a gun gamer, but even then, I still played other games though. But even I can call out what's fucking bad in general, okay? All right? Okay, Aztec Cross, look, man, you're a good guy. I get it. You love those specific games that were like, what is it, the looter shooter games? I get it. I completely understand. But when I saw your video specifically defending Highguard, what are we doing here, man? What are we doing? Come on. Come on, man. You know exactly you can't defend this game, okay? You cannot defend this game. He spent a lot of his time on Destiny 2, so please excuse him. He is still kind of cool. He's defending Marathon right now, okay? All right? It's 2 for 2 so far. It's gonna be 2 for 2 for strikes, okay? 3 strikes, and all I gotta say is, I think you lost your privileges on speaking on your opinion. That's all I gotta say. So I love you, man. You're a cool guy. Don't get me wrong. But sometimes you gotta have someone who will whisper to you into your ears and actually give you some actual right opinions. Let's be honest here, okay? All right. Well, I hope he's getting paid for defending those games then. I don't know about that one, Chief. I didn't see no hashtag ad in those videos. Hey, Firefly.
Bloomberg aptly highlights right here, these are all things that could have been identified if they had just done a playtest. If they would have foregone their hubris and instead done this process properly with a live service like this, so much could have been figured out and salvaged if they had just allowed people to provide feedback and if they had made proper changes prior to the...
You think, Dubstep, do you actually think that somebody of the caliber of Crimson Desert would shadow drop a game like that? especially in the West. Do you think anybody in the Western game development would make a game like Crimson Desert or anything similar to that, as in like not like the same genre, but as in like the quality, the content, and everything? You're out of your damn mind if you actually do think if that's actually going to come true at any day. I can believe more in the Eastern Asian devs. I can believe more Black Myth Zhong Kui doing a shadow drop than I do believe compared to any other game from the Western development sphere to do it. That's all I gotta say. Nah, Destiny 2 changes a man. Being a Destiny 2 player gives you a debuff to like everything. That's what I'm saying. He needs to let go. I get it. I understand. That's how you build your fan base. That's how you build your, that's how you build your core fan base, was from Destiny itself. But the problem is, Bungie is not the same. I get it that he loves those types of games, but sometimes you gotta call it out when it needs to be called out. That's why at the end of the day, Aztec Cross is a ball and gun gamer, and he's not, if he does not change or at least revolutionize himself, we're not gonna see much anything different. And I will call him out on his shenanigans. I will, because I'm just kind of like, come on, Aztec Cross, you know for a fact that this game is not good. Okay, stop lying to yourself. You're coping really hard. I get it. You're a casual gamer. I understand. But even casual gamers can call out BS at the end of the day, okay? One day he will get into a real game. Give him time. I got faith in the man. I don't know, man. I don't know, man. I have a lot of distrust on Aztec Cross, because that man is literally defending that marathon game, and I haven't seen his recent video on what he thinks personally, but I gotta keep it for a spade, man. You just gotta call it. You have to be harsh. It's called tough love at the end of the day. If you're not tough on these developers and you're trying to pattern them and be like super soft on them, be like, oh, it's okay, it's all right, you just gotta do a little bit of this and but it's a good game, No, that's not how it works in the real world. No, that's not how it works. You don't give trophies to everybody, okay? You got winners and you got losers, okay? That's how the world works, okay? Yeah, I know a future studio from the West studio will shadow drop a legendary hentai game. Your mom's gonna drop a legendary hentai game. What if he's doing it for the sponsor back? None of the videos are literally have sponsorships. And if he's actually accepting money from Bungie themselves and not pushing #ad in the goddamn description or in the video itself, that is illegal.
Big launch. And so yeah, the end result was that in 24 hours, the game lost over 80% of its players. A week later, it lost roughly 90% of its players. Fast forward to today, and the concurrent players has dipped so much that we're looking at a game that's only retained around less than 1% of its all-time peak concurrent player numbers. They had missed the mark so much that just 2 weeks after the game's release on February 11th, 2026, the company called an all-hands-on meeting and told employees that most of them would be laid off because they just ran out of money. And a big part of that had to do with the fact that Tencent apparently pulled their funding on the studio when they saw that the metrics surrounding the game and its commercial performance were not meeting certain bars that they had to meet for Tencent to continue funding. The game apparently didn't even come close to achieving the results that Tencent was expecting. And so Tencent said, I'm out, and that's when the layoffs had to happen.
Damn.
The end result is that right now, less than...
Nah, you see, man wants Marathon to do well so that Bungie can fund Destiny 3, or what he really wants, a Destiny Classic. He has to let go. He has to let go. Aztec Cross needs to let go. It's not the same studio anymore. It'll never be peak Bungie.
20 people remain at Wildlight, which is nowhere near enough people to make content at a scale and quality and consistent level of output that will allow a live service to thrive and to be properly maintained. This is very much a dead service at this point, one that is on a fast decline and is barely on life support. The remaining less than 20 people are continuing to update Highguard with the hope of salvaging the game and bringing players back, but I just don't see that happening. Ain't no way. Which finally brings us to what multiple developers cited as the element that ultimately led to Wildlight's and Highguards' downfall. Bloomberg's article states right here that speaking to former developers, they use the word hubris, a belief by the company's leadership that they could emulate what had worked in the past with Apex Legends, no matter how much the gaming landscape had changed since then.
You cannot do the same thing what you did with Apex Legends back then. You cannot do the same thing. No, sir, you cannot. Unless like you're on the same level as like for example what Dubset said, on Crimson Desert levels of content and serviceability and the amount of shit you can do in the game. No, it's not possible. Less than 20 people and a bad work culture? Yeah.
After all, they'd made one of the last decade's biggest hits. Basically, that
is such a big ego thing. Oh, we're gonna emulate the same thing what we did years ago when Apex Legends came in because it worked a decade ago. That is such a huge. Even if the gaming landscape has changed, we can still do the same thing. Dude, that is such a huge ego thing. That is just straight up just huge ego mentality, and that is not a good thing to have.
Mentality of like, we made Apex Legends, we made Titanfall, we are untouchable. We just repeat Apex Legends strategy and all will work out because we are former Respawn developers. But again, there's a brand new studio with a brand new game making a brand new IP that isn't in line with games like Apex Legends and Titanfall, that is set in a completely different universe, whose gameplay is pretty different and whose overall like aesthetics and everything look very different as well. To attempt this kind of strategy as a newcomer that has not proven anything is very much hubris. But at least apparently
they should have made a Titanfall inspired game, to be frankly honest. That's what they should have done. Basically, I had aura then and I got aura to make greatness type of shit. That's basically is what they're saying in layman's terms, basically.
The working environment within Wildlight was described as healthy, collaborative, transparent, and made many love working there. That is until the last 2 months when morale started to tank, when people realized that success might not be guaranteed, no straight answers about what success would look like, leading staff to grumble that they might be approaching things the wrong way, which now we know in hindsight they absolutely did. And the end result is an unceremonious and tragic end to what was a valiant attempt. I have no doubt that the developers had every good intention to try to ship the best and most fun product possible.
But I blame the higher-ups for this shit though. Not doing a beta or an open beta or a closed beta for this game is suicide. At least for a live service game, it's fucking suicide.
Based on their strengths as developers, but there were a number of like strategic and marketing and game design mishaps, as well as this like echo chamber effect and a lack of listening to certain developers who had the hindsight to be like, maybe we should put out a beta or something, maybe we should take certain different approaches and not just try to emulate what we did with Apex Legends. Because
like I said, there are some developers, like I said specifically when I said at the beginning of the video or so that I have game developers or so that worked on actual like video games and stuff like that. They said specifically before when they told me there are some developers that are insufferable to work with behind the scenes when making video games. Okay, this is the exact same thing of what I said a while back or so, that there are some developers that are just insufferable to work with. And well, Lord and behold, this is what you got. I know one of my friends specifically is working on a game. I haven't heard shit about that game in general. We seen like one cinematic trailer of that game. It was during the Game Awards a couple of years back. We've only seen like one trailer, but we haven't heard jack shit from that game. Ever since then, we haven't heard nothing about the game in general. I'm super curious to see what's gonna happen to that game.
Environment we're in is different from that. All of that ultimately contributed to a game that came and went almost as fast as Concord did. Yeah, I do hope that these developers do land on their feet somewhere else and that they succeed in their future endeavors. But when it comes to Wildlight and Highguard, just kind of came and then it went. And I just truly don't foresee any chance of a comeback. It take nothing short of a miracle, unfortunately. But that, folks, is everything you need to know about the latest surrounding Highguard, and probably the last we'll ever hear of this title. I don't think there's really much more to say about this game.
That's the end
I'd love
of
to hear what your thoughts and opinions are on Highguard, its marketing, its launch, your experience if you play the game, and its post-launch in the comments below. And to be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on Young Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Young out.
The last video that we're going to be hearing about Highguard is the closing of Highguard. That would be the last video. I don't know, maybe next year we get Highguard 2. No. We get Concord. Alright? We get Concord 2.5. The Revolutionary Edition, you know? Or the Revised Edition, anyways. So, but yeah. That's it, man. Concord 2 is dead. Concord 3 is coming out, and I think by the time of this video it's already out. I'm super curious to see on the numbers on that game, but yeah. Revised, remastered edition, yeah. Just sell me the Highguard IP. I'll buy it from you. I got $2 for my name right now. I'll give you $2 and a bag of Jolly Rancher gummies. Yeah, I got a bag of Jolly Rancher gummies here. And $2, and I'll buy the IP from you. Like I said, my offer's on the table, okay? I'll buy it from you guys. I'll definitely do something with the IP. So, anyways, that's the end of the video. And honestly, we still probably got one more video on Highguard, which is the closing of Highguard. We'll see how long it lasts. Like I said, if they manage to pull out through, I'll be super impressed. If not, well, all I gotta say is, well, at least it'll last longer than Concord 2. $3 bid from me. Which one was Concord 3? It's Marathon. But yeah. Anyways, that's the end of the video. That's the end of, well, not really the end, but it will be the end of Highguard. My curiosity if it's gonna survive through the month of March.